a North Dakota man, obviously a Democrat in this situation, named Shannon Brandt, called the North Dakota Highway Patrol on Sunday, saying that he had struck a pedestrian in an alleyway in McHenry with his 2003 Ford Explorer. And what he really meant by that is allegedly he used his car as a weapon and ran this individual, Kaylor Ellingson, 18 years old, down, murdered him with his car. That is the allegation. Brandt claimed at the time that Ellingson was part of a Republican extremist group. This is according to the Highway Patrol report. What really happened here was, again, from the police report, there was an argument over politics, and this individual, who is clearly left-wing, Shannon Brandt, ran down this 18-year-old and killed him, allegedly in cold blood here. I mean, they're saying this, obviously, there's a legal implications. You know, you have to always say until there's actually a conviction. But, Clay, we all understand that if this were different, if a guy in a metaphorical or real MAGA hat had run down some Democrat, a Hillary voter, in his car because they had had an argument over politics, we would be told by CNN and MSNBC and the New York Times that we need a national conversation about the threat of MAGA extremism, white supremacy. Even the two guys involved here, white, doesn't matter. White supremacy, MAGA extremism. This is the political violence that they put right at the feet of Donald Trump himself. Joe Biden he looked like the Emperor Palpatine from Star Wars.
Yes.
The theatrics around this, it did honestly look like Stalin was giving a speech in the darkest days of the Soviet Union when the purge was going on. And a couple of weeks later, this happens. Now, the left would connect those dots if the political affiliation was different. How many people have even heard about this story, or more to the point, how many have seen a major news network, other than Fox, even touch on this story?
Well, there's a bunch of things here. First, you're 100% right, because we know this. One person, I believe I'm correct, Buck, you can correct me if I'm wrong, died in Charlottesville, and it was laid directly at Donald Trump's feet because he had the audacity to come out and say, which you go back and look at the transcript, that many of the people, which he was correct, who were protesting the removal of statues were right, and that this wasn't going to end with Confederate statues and it would move on to Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and even Abraham Lincoln. He was 100% right about that, what I think is fair to call woke history and the way that it's being attributed.
And the lie is why Joe Biden ran for president, just so everyone remembers that. Joe Biden said, based on that lie.
The lie was that Trump had called these Nazi protesters very fine people. He did not. He pointed out that there were very fine people on both sides, which was accurate. He directly condemned neo-Nazis and everybody else. You go look at the transcript. This is one of the great lies that was spread by the media to attack Trump. So we know he was held completely responsible for the death of, I believe, that woman in Charlottesville. This story is receiving no attention in the New York Times, no attention at CNN, no attention at the Washington Post, okay? And frankly, we need to get some answers from the North Dakota politicians about what exactly is going on here, Buck, because this guy was only charged with vehicular homicide, which seems like a relatively low charge, and he's out on bail. $50,000, Buck. All he had to post was $50,000, and he's already out on bail. Now, maybe, to be fair, there are some details and circumstances surrounding this case that are not yet public that would justify that being the case. But this is a red state where a Republican supporter was, based on the details that are out right now, killed based on his politics. How in the world are North Dakota politicians not speaking out about this? How is the AG not speaking out? How is the governor not speaking out aggressively? And how does a guy get a vehicular homicide charge for what appears to be an intentional murder? And how does he get it? How is he already back out on the streets for a $50,000 bail? Now, again, I want to be clear. If there are details in this case that are not yet public that can explain that, we will share them on this show. But, Buck, I looked into this pretty aggressively. I'm sure you have as well. I haven't seen anything that would suggest this is anything other than what has been reported so far.
Is this a hate crime is another question
Yes.
we might want to pose for everybody. Killing somebody over politics. It actually is something that the left would argue is terrorism. They would say that this guy is, if he were a Republican who killed a Democrat over a political fight, this would be labeled terrorism.
It would also be on the front page of the newspaper. It would have been a lead story for multiple days. MAGA extremism, this is a natural result and outgrowth of everything that Trump has said.
And look, I mean, we're a country of 330 million people, although given all the illegal immigration, who knows what the real number is. But we're a country of 330 million people, and one individual's actions should not be placed at the feet of an entire political ideology. That is true, but the problem is the Democrats do that to us all the time. Every time, and even sometimes when there's somebody who is in no way actually a conservative or a Republican, but, they had a couple of right-leaning views on something, they believe in secure borders, they're a terrorist, oh my gosh, it's Donald Trump's fault, right? Whatever it may be, they will make the leaps necessary because they see all this as political warfare, friends. You have to understand, it's not about what's true. For the true leftists these days, for the commies that are in our midst, whatever they have to do to achieve political power, they think is inherently justified. Our media certainly is in that category right now. They believe that lying is a necessary step in defeating the MAGA extremism that has swept through the country. And they won't stop and say, wow, Joe Biden's actually really bad at this.
We talked earlier in this hour about how no matter where you are in the country, there is a murder that has occurred in the last several months of a completely innocent person that has made substantial news in your community. Everywhere it is happening. And part of it is just the lawlessness in general that is existing in much of our country. Since 2019, murders are up over 40% nationwide. Many cities doubling, tripling, setting all-time highs. I mean, it's through the roof. Democrats are making a ploy now to try to pass bills to give more money to police. The irony here, of course, is that Joe Biden's probably best vote and achievement was the 1994 crime bill, which brought down crime enormously in the country by allowing police to do their jobs. And then he had to repudiate that vote as a method to win the Democrat nomination in 2020. But it's not only crimes of extreme violence. It's also just basic cleanliness, the ability to actually run a business. And I believe we have an LA small business owner talking about the challenge in our nation's second largest city of just running a small business in this era of lawlessness. Listen.
In Sherman Oaks, California.
You think I'll play when I say you gotta die? You really gotta die.
The homelessness crisis.
You gotta get your half-naked ass out of my restaurant right now.
Has business owners closing up shops and employees fearing for their safety.
They come in, tweaking out and things of that nature. So, you never know what you're going to get here on patrol.
They've dealt with fires caused by the unhoused, aggression on a daily basis.
Every single morning, I'm wiping that off my property before I have to do business.
Sir, why are you throwing feces at people?
Every day is like another adventure of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It is like literally a psych ward. That's okay. Pooping on the street, peeing on the street, having sex on the street, making threats without a weapon is okay now.
Sherman Oaks, California, for those of you who don't know, this ain't a rough neighborhood typically of L.A. It used to be a fairly nice area. Buck, I also saw Bill Walton. You may remember the name Bill Walton. He was a big-time UCLA basketball player. Super, super lib, typically. He's gone off in San Diego, one of the cities where we're number one in. Thanks. Good morning, San Diego. Thanks to everybody out there. Look, the situation is so bad that even left-wingers are like Bill Walton, hey, we got to have some sanity on our streets, some rule of law, and they're losing their minds over what's happening everywhere.
You can't have a well-functioning, happy, and productive society over the long term if people can live on the streets, shoot drugs up in front of children, and throw feces at passersby. This may come as a shock to a lot of Democrats. It turns out that this doesn't make us more progressive and happier and healthier. Allowing this decay and lawlessness, and in many ways actually encouraging it by the policies they've pursued. It's top to bottom, Clay. I mean, look at what they've done. You can take it city by city. We were just talking about Portland. We've obviously got Oregon, a governor's race that is possible for a Republican to win.
Yes.
What have they done there? They've made it so you can they've decriminalized drugs. They've allowed camping on the streets. They've allowed theft to go without, stealing from businesses to go without punishment. They've allowed public disorder, public urination, public defecation, simple assaults not prosecuted, armed robberies not prosecuted heavily enough. You go down the list and you want to look at every lib and say, what the hell are you people doing? What is wrong with you? And this is why Lee Zeldin, who we're probably going to be talking to maybe next week, has a real shot in New York. I mean, New York State has a huge Democrat advantage. But enough Democrats realize this whole defund the police, hashtag BLM stuff has done nothing but immiserate people, destroy businesses, and result in a lot more theft, rape, and murder across the country. That is the end result. That is what we are seeing. And the problem that everyone has to understand is these progressive DAs, they're not just going to stop. They think we haven't suffered enough. They think eventually we'll turn the corner with these weak policies and the pandering and the social justice. So, we either care about this or we keep suffering, right? That's what happens as a country.
And that's why I think we're 47 days out from the midterm. It's why I believe, and I really do think this, that everything is starting to come together to create this red tide, this red wave that everybody said, oh, it's getting tamped down, it's not going to happen. Actually, if you're starting to look at these individual state-by-state races, you know when it started to turn, Buck? The Biden speech. The Biden standing in front of the big red backdrop looked like the spawn of Satan. That is when things started to turn. Now, I partly think, Buck, that's because we said this might very well happen. People got back into their school cycles. They got done with the summer, and everybody around Labor Day starts to pivot towards the midterms, and the closing arguments start to get made. And I think that factored in a big way. But my goodness, like when you actually start to look, there is the possibility that this red wave, which I believe is building, Buck, could sweep out in Washington, Oregon, Colorado. There are a lot of places where there's lingering potential here.
I mean, I'm reminded of the stupidity of Democrats. I live in Midtown Manhattan. I'm born and raised here. I worked for the NYPD. Like, I know this city, right? Clay, I walk around. I'm going through Times Square all the time because I happen to live in Midtown. And I'll be presented with a gun-free zone sign these days, right? I walk past the gun. So even if I can get a concealed carry permit, which they will slow walk and it'll take me years to get, if I had a concealed carry permit and I'm walking around my own neighborhood at night, they would arrest me for going into Times Square as a gun-free zone while people are shooting up heroin on the corner, people are getting robbed at gunpoint and knife point. And Kathy Hochul thinks, yeah, social justice, this is good. These people are lunatics.